Hello, welcome to the Peace Partners program. I'm your host, Chuol Jany. Coming up in this week's show. As South Sudan commemorates the SPLA Day, President Salva Kiir assured the public of his government commitment to peace implementation. Former child soldier who become member of Red Army, known as Jiec Amir, narrate their experience during the liberation struggle.
It is a painful journey for the underage, 9 years old or 10 years old to travel for a long run, but it's a struggle of freedom.
The independence of our country is what took the life of your loved ones.
Amnesty International alert the UN Security Council not to lift South Sudan arms embargo, citing the human rights abuses by the security organ. A university lecturer, Chuol, support the human rights call to keep the restriction.
The issue of arms embargo is something that, in my opinion, could have been kept on hold for some time so that that one will be lifted when we had the issue of a unified forces.
And Non-Oil Revenue Mobilization Conference held in Juba to address ways of managing resources to improve the economic growth. That's all to come in the program. South Sudan President Salva Kiir did as repeat his call and his government commitments to implement the revitalized peace agreement. The head of state salutes the army as the country marks 38 SPLA Days anniversary on May 16, 2021. The day was signifying Battalions 105 who fired the first bullets in Bor, and it was also demonstrated the second phase of the nation journey to the State House. Organized forces were saluted on their duty while compromising mounting challenges. The president vowed soldiers' situations would not remain unresolved for long. While progress in the peace implementation, there will be a silver lining up in the horizontal, he quoted. President Kiir added that his engagement with all-out group to smooth the transition to the peace settlement. The citizens and stakeholders sharing relative all upholding the cessation of hostilities among the various forces to impact the agreement's positivity. Red Army marched along the street of Juba, celebrate the SPLA Day. It is a national holiday in South Sudan calendar, described as a liberation day. Former child soldier Peter Atem Ngor says the day is dedicated to the citizen who contributed during the 21 years of war leading to independence on July 9, 2011. He narrated his experience during the liberation struggle.
I cry sometimes when I remember some Red Army fall in the front line, some Red Army dying in training camp, and some Red Army dying when we are going to Panyunduk and some other places. And it's a long way. Some Red Army are dying when we are making distance from Bargadal to Ethiopia, and from Bentiu to that one, from Jabal Nuba Mountain to Ethiopia, and Brunei to Ethiopia, and from Bor to Ethiopia. It is a painful journey for the underage, 9 years old or 10 years old to travel for a long run, but it's a struggle of freedom. And freedom is a price of freedom because it's not cheaper to get the freedom. Freedom is freedom. This is why that day I'm very happy today to celebrate it with some people who are alive. When I was going to Ethiopia in 1983, I left in Bor in 1987, and I come back to Palan in the 90s. I come in Palan in the 90s. And then 90s I came to Palan. And that Palan, just we fought for it, and that's it. That day, I remember Jany when I come from Kapota out to Eastern Sudan, and I'm very happy. And I'm trying to make sure that day not a bad day. It's a good day to remember that day. We'll continue to remember. We can tell birthday to South Sudan. Birthday, happy birthday, 16 May.
The chairperson of SPLM Red Army League, Samuel Duardeng, describes 16 May as a joyful day for liberations and called the leaders to promote the unity of South Sudanese. Duar warned the people to stop violence that lead to loss of life, as it is a time to build cohesion through peace agreement parties are implementing. He spoke to me in this interview.
It's a joyous day, a day when the first bullet of our liberation struggle was shot in Bor town by the Battalion number 105 under the command of Major General Karbino Kwanyin Bol. This day is a day that we all remember. in our life with the SPLM, because this is a day that that opened the way towards the liberation struggle. Most of the comrades who joined later were actually because the bell was rang in Bo Town in 16 May 1983. That bell was heard all over South Sudan by the most marginalized people, and also not only in South Sudan but in the whole of Sudan, by the marginalized areas of the Sudan. So people of Sudan joined with their masses and took arms against the oppressive regime in Khartoum by then under Nimeri. So this day is an important day that we should celebrate every year, so that it has to be in our history, because this is a day when the first bullet was shot, and this is a day that led to the independence of South Sudan that we are now in, calling ourselves a country, a sovereign country. We have it in our constitution, and it is a constitutional obligation that this day must be commemorated and must be given as a holiday. A holiday.
What can you tell to the mothers and also the fathers who lost their children during the liberation struggle?
In fact, I should begin with comrade veterans, officers, NCOs, and men, the people of South Sudan who lost their loved ones during this liberation struggle, that this is what we went for, what we are now sitting in, what we are enjoying now, the independence of our country, is what took the life of your loved ones.
What can be a lesson to be learned by the South Sudanese not to go to war again as the parties are implementing the peace agreement?
People of South Sudan must learn a lesson of a devastating war that has happened. This small chance that we are trying now to forge the unity and love for one another. Let's continue with this revitalized peace agreement and implement it in the spirit and letter, so that we regain and rebuild this country that has been ravaged by war.
That was Samuel Duar, the chairperson of SPLM Red Army League, ending this interview. Amnesty International has warned UN Security Council not to lift the South Sudan army embargo next week, May 27. The Security Council is anticipated to sit next week to review South Sudan's status on implementing the revitalized peace agreement. Amnesty International issued a warning statement ahead of the meeting, cautioning that the Security Council should observe a human rights benchmark are met before the arms embargo can be lifted. The document citing that the areas include crimes against international law, reform of national security, and the establishment of hybrid court to ensure their accountability should be put in consideration. Impunity, accountability, and human rights abuses were a specific alarming battle for the Amnesty International. They said the Security Council assessed the keeping or lifting the arms embargo on South Sudan. Activists demand the perpetrators of the crimes committed will be brought to justice, establishing an impartial, independent, and effective hybrid court and other transitional justice mechanism as an additional benchmark. South Sudan political analyst Abraham Chuol embraced the Amnesty International call, saying the UN Security Council should keep the arms embargo on hold until the unified forces in the unity government graduated are complete.
The issue of arms embargo is something that, in my opinion, could have been kept on hold for some time, so that that one will be lifted when we had the issue of unified forces. So that if there is anything to do with procurement of arms, it has to be procured by the National Unified Army. So this kind of arms embargo, it has to affect both sides in this case.
Despite the small implementation, the relative calm in South Sudan, implementation of the peace agreement, the signatories to the deal did less about security arrangement in the chapter of contract. Abrams comments the unified army should do any ammunition procurement because unintegrated forces will use the loophole to purchase weapons differently to risk the peaceful political settlement.
Well, if it is lifted, there is going to be a problem because you see into it that the Ministry of Defense is being mandated by the two major parties, the SPLA-IO and the SPLA-IG. So if it is lifted, and mostly the SPLA-IO will be, the minister, for example, will be able to use his own power to procure weapons for the IO. And the Chief of Defense Forces with the deputy will be able to use their mandate of procuring the weapon for SSPDF. Then that could lead into a big tension on both sides fighting over resources on who should be able to get armed. Remember that currently we had the forces that had already been trained, and those forces, mostly from other side, the training side, most of them, they don't have weapons. And this could be the opportunity for the government to be able to buy weapons and provide to these people. But the fact remains that if these were soldiers, then they were expected to have their own weapons. Therefore, this is where I'm seeing a very big challenge that is going to come in.
Amnesty International Deputy Regional Director for East Africa, Sarah Jackson, defined South Sudan had won independence 10 years ago as sadly not resulting in a respect for human rights. State security forces has been accused of blocking the freedom of expressions, include media freedom. An armed group continue to violate international humanitarian law that is mounting to war crime. The unity government repeat call for lifting armed embargo UN imposed, citing that it caused the delay for the graduation of unified forces. A week ago, the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs, Angelina Tange, has declared to graduate joint security forces on May 31st. Several reports indicated that soldiers are deserting training center and cantonment areas due to the poor condition. The defense minister said Security Council demands unity government implement the graduation of forces, the reunifications of command, and redeployments of unified forces before considering lifting the armed embargo. You are listening to Peace Partners Program. The government of South Sudan has conducted Non-Oil Revenue Mobilization Conference to manage resources and to improve the country's economic growth. The first ever conference about resource management in the unity government was attended by the President Salva Kiir, government officials and other international partners. An event was organized by National Revenue Authority officially to establish a common understanding on the role, particularly the State Revenue Authority. The session was led by Commissioner General Honorable Patrick Mogoya. President Salva Kiir said the conference is an opportunity to address the challenges of overlapping jurisdictions in the revenue collection, including focusing on the mobilization of non-oil revenue as a key factor to building a sustainable and permanent public service delivery service. RSS Local Government Act also established the responsibility for the state and local government to collect and manage revenue without clearly demarcating the individual responsible of each institution and level of government. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm your host, Chuol Jany. Join me again next week on Peace Partners Program, and do keep